Thanks everyone for being here today. Let me tell you a little bit about the Columbus Dispatch Digital that we've had here for a while. So here at the Columbus Metropolitan Library, we've really gone all in on collecting our local newspapers. They're one of our most used local history and genealogy resources. We literally use them every single hour of every day for every question, just about. And they're a part of our community that we believe is too important to lose. With a lot of the changes that are happening in media across the country right now, they're sometimes, at least in our community, not any other home for some of these newspapers. You'll hear about that later. So for us, this means collecting in multiple formats, which originally, when we first started having these conversations, goes against everything we're taught in library school. I know, I get it, I feel you if you're thinking that at the moment, but let me try to tell you why today as well. So I'm going to focus primarily in my remarks on the Columbus Dispatch, which is not the oldest paper in Columbus history, but the one major paper that survives today. In 1985, it became the sole major newspaper in the city when the Columbus Citizen Journal ceased publication. So it's been the paper of record, if not the paper of record, for over a century and one of the most significant resources for Columbus history. So that's part of the reason why we collect in multiple formats as well. Some of those include what you see on the screen here. I've got some more shots. Microfilm is available in the cabinets you see on the side there, which is accessible here on the third floor of Main Library. And we have it on hard copy. We'll talk more about that. It's a little scary sometimes, but we do have it on hard copy, primarily because we found, as many of you, if you have microfilm collections, the microfilm is not always perfect. There are pages missing, there's overexposures, underexposures, one page is torn out or part of a page is torn out. So we do keep that hard copy with the hopes of eventually, maybe someday, going back and exchanging some of those pages on the film or digital. And that's a decision we've made, again, because there's no other hard copy or no other copy, period, of this newspaper, and it's so important to the work that we do. So we can talk about that more as well. And then the Columbus Dispatch Digital, which is what we're going to talk about mostly today. So we purchased the digitized issues from 1871 to 1985 back in 2018. We're hoping to purchase additional years as the time goes on. The images that you see around the room on the banners are taken from the Dispatch Digital, so you can see that users get the full image of the newspaper, giving them access to all the articles, ads, classifieds, etc. And they also get that context on the page. So not only are you just getting the article itself, but you see what else is happening that day, which I think is sometimes really interesting, but also important for research as well. So for post-1985 materials, we have text-only access at the moment, which isn't as great because it misses some of the articles. Obituaries in particular, we find are not always there, and doesn't have the ads or the context of the full page. And you'll see why that's going to be important here as well. So what can we use this for? I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but let me give you some words that you can take back when you have these conversations about why you should purchase a digitized historical newspaper database or do something like this on your own. So you can see a variety of things on the slide here. Pretty much any question that we get, the dispatch comes into play at some point, whether that's the first place we look or happens further down in the process, we almost always use it. So genealogy and obituaries. This is the obituary here for the Reverend James Poindexter, who was the pastor at Second Baptist Church here in Columbus from 1862 to 1893 and was elected our first Black City Council member in 1880, which I think is really cool. We also use it for house and property histories. Because it's a full-text searchable database, we can search specific addresses. So at the bottom here, you're seeing the first entry for 96 South Grand Avenue. For those of you who Ubered, you'll know that's where you are at the moment. And it's an ad for childcare. This at one point was the Noah Swain mansion, and apparently Noah Swain and his family needed a nurse. So great if you're trying to find out the first of something, or who lived in a particular house, or what just in general the history of a property is. So lots of different uses here. Let me talk about how this worked before we had the Dispatch Digital, because this is really what makes the difference for us. So we've got some sample searches on here. I just kind of want to go through how we would do this work before and how we do it today, and I think you'll come to understand pretty quickly why this has been a game changer for us. So for the first one, the obituary for author James Grover Thurber, pretty straightforward. We know when Thurber died. That's a picture of him with his dog there. If you've read James Thurber, you know he's all about dogs. So we know when he died, pretty simple. We can load the microfilm for that date. Maybe you have to go the day or two after, but we can pull that obit, print it out on the microfilm machine, scan it, whatever, and get it to the library customer pretty quickly. So that one's okay. For the next one, what business was at 3000 Hayden Road? We would have likely started with city directories, and we probably would still do that, but what we get with the full-text searchable Dispatch Digital is even more than that. We can type in that address, not only find what businesses was there, but we're also going to get advertisements. So if it, not in this case, but if it was a store, you're going to get all of their ads over the years. You're going to see how that changed. You'll see if there was anything else in the newspaper about them. So you really just get a much deeper and richer kind of set of information. We could not have done this before this full-text searchable, because you would have had to know the exact date that this business was in the newspaper. Impossible to know, right? Unless there was a big event you knew you could search around. So the next one, the newspaper article about Mamie Moore, is a little more complicated as well. Mamie Moore, just a little bit of background about her because I think it's a great story. She lived from 1895 to 1978 and was affectionately known as the mother of the Columbus branch of the NAACP. She worked with the Urban League, the YMCA, PTA, Boys and Girls Clubs. You get the idea here. She was pretty much involved in everything. And she also, as a civil rights activist, was alongside Dr. Martin Luther King when he gave his I Have a Dream speech. So really a super important person in Columbus history and involved in everything from the 20th century. Pretty much everything you can imagine, she's going to be there. So someone wants to find an article about Mamie Moore. There are thousands of them around which topic, which date, what are you looking for? Do you want just general information about her? You know, you all can do the reference interview in your head, you know how that goes. In the past, we would have had to figure out very, very specifically what that customer is looking for to be able to even have a chance at going to the microfilm, browsing around, trying to find the article. Now we can do some clever searching, which I'll show you a little bit of, and we can get to that pretty quickly. So that really has been a game changer for us as well. Some of these things where we would have probably had to say we just can't do before, we're able to do now. Another common one, before I show you the last example there, is I personally was this isn't true, but if it was, I was in the newspaper when I was in 4th grade for my soccer team. You know, the only thing I can give you, if that's your question before this, is let's sit you down on a microfilm machine and you can browse the entire year of your 4th grade time and see if you can find that picture, that article of yourself. So that's another great example. Let me talk about the last one here. A common request we've gotten in the last few years, you can understand why, is more information about the 1918 flu pandemic. Kind of the same process here. We know that from the spring of 1918 through the spring of 1919, the pandemic caused more than 550,000 deaths in the United States. But when would we look on the microfilm for articles here in Columbus? Before, it was a lot of educated guessing and browsing, kind of things we know from histories and elsewhere about maybe when it might have been worse here in Columbus, what was happening. But it was still a lot of pretty much putting someone on a microfilm machine and saying, "We wish you luck," which is not what we like to do here. So now, however, we can answer that question very easily. We cannot use the words 1918 flu pandemic, and I'll explain why that is as well. But really, at least we're able to help folks now. So let me tell you a little bit about the way the searching works on this. So it uses optical character recognition, or OCR, for those of you that are familiar. And it does not have any article segmentation or keyword search capability. So oftentimes the mistake folks will make is thinking they can type in things like 1918 flu pandemic, which was not what they called it in 1918. That's what we call it today, right? And then so you're not going to find that anywhere in the newspaper. So you're going to have to think about words that made sense at the time. So let me say a little bit more about the imaging here. Images are scanned bitonally, which is not great for photographs. You'll see how some of the photographs come out, but does make the OCR much, much better. So you've got that advantage there. So all in all, the OCR is pretty good. It helps as well that the nature of journalism is to repeat information. So even if you've missed, the OCR has missed a word maybe in one part of the article, you're likely to find it somewhere else. So that makes a big difference for the OCR as well. Again, remember that we're searching full text here, so we need to think like we're reading the newspaper at the time, which is this whole kind of shift you have to make in your head to take away our 2024 language and step back to whatever year that you're using. So historical terms that may have been applied later, think about World War II or even Watergate. Watergate was just a hotel for a very long time, right? Are terms that were applied after the fact. So those are not going to work as searches. You've got an example. If you can see this, I know it's kind of small, but we were doing some research the other day trying to determine when actually the first gay pride parade was here in Columbus. You'd think we would know this, but there's some controversy. That's a longer story. So you can see that we limited by date here, since in an earlier time, the words gay and pride meant something totally different than they mean today. So it didn't make any sense to have that search show up earlier. And in this case, we had to experiment with several different search terms, as you can imagine, to be able to complete the research. This also gets into some challenges just around language in general and explaining to customers that the language for something like a gay pride parade in 1970 is not going to be language that we would use today. There's going to be a lot of derogatory words that are used, and the only way to find them is to type those words. So that is something we work with folks on, and it can cause some challenging conversations, but it is kind of stepping into that historical thinking box and really being able to make that work for you. So just real quickly, in addition to the proximity, did we do proximity searching? I didn't. Let me tell you a little bit about that real quick. There is a proximity search. Did I put that up there? Where you can do near. The word near really makes a difference. So in this case, we did gay near to pride. So those two words have to be within 2 words of each other. Otherwise, you get all kinds of gazillions of results that aren't going to help you as much. So in addition to proximity searching, of course, there's Boolean operators that you really need to use for a lot of general terms. The example I have here is we've had some controversy around the Christopher Columbus statue. Our city, of course, was named after Christopher Columbus, and the statue was in front of City Hall here from 1955 to 2020. It was removed at that time. And so when that was happening, we were trying to figure out the history of it, how this came to be, that we had a very large, I think he was like 50 feet tall or something, statue of Columbus here in our city. And so searching Columbus statue by itself, every page of the Columbus Dispatch has the word Columbus on it. So not super helpful, right? You get like 15 million results. So we just used Columbus and statue to kind of connect those words a little bit. So we were seeing both there. Still, again, we had to fiddle with it a little bit, but we got where we needed to be, which is that they installed the statue in 1955 as a gift from Genoa, Italy. So, and I can tell you more about that whole story if you are interested as well. Finally, one of the great resources that our customers love is just the ability to email, print, download, all the things that your folks are asking for as well, because it just makes it easier for them to do their research. We find we have hobbyist researchers, we have academic researchers. We can sit students down with this and they can just go to town on it in a way that, before when we would kind of point them to the microfilm machines, they gave us that look, that they're humoring us, but they're not really going to sit there, right? So that's happened before. So it's just been really great for anyone in the community. It's easy to use. We get a lot of questions about why all of our newspapers are not available in this way. I think we're starting to see, I would hypothesize, more of an expectation that everything is digitized, and if it's not digitized, what's the problem? And we all know that it takes time and money and all those things. But I think we're seeing that more with customers as to what else is going on. And then we see questions about why we have the 1985 cutoff for the full text newspapers, and that's just we haven't purchased the rest, so that's a conversation that we have as well. Overall, like I said at the beginning of my remarks, we really use this multiple times every hour. I myself use it multiple times every day for just about any question that comes up that we can help our users with. So you're probably wondering what that looks like in terms of actual stats and numbers. So I'm going to introduce Laura Simonds, who is our Director of Collection Services, who's going to give you a little bit about our usage stats.
I'm the head of collection services, and so my team makes the decisions about what resources we buy. We have a budget for premium resources, and as we started to talk about purchasing the historical archive of the Dispatch, Angela and her team were huge proponents of this. As you can see, it's sure. Absolutely. Angela and her team were big proponents of buying this, and you can see how much they use it in their work. And because it's the paper of record for our community, we felt that it was really important, but it's also a capital investment for us. We're talking about millions of scanned pages, and so there was a cost associated with that. So we did a lot of research into how other libraries used it, how much usage they were getting, and frankly, some of the numbers they shared, we thought that can't be right. And yet, we have these numbers. So we had over 500,000 uses in the first full year that we had the Dispatch. We bought it in late 2018 through late 2019, over 500,000 accesses, and over 1.1 million in the first 2 years. Then we got into the pandemic, and I feel like 2020 numbers, that just means Angela and her team were really, really, really busy because they were one of the services that we could do remotely and they could do research. So usage has dropped a little bit. It is starting to come back up, but that's really indicative of what we're seeing with all of our resources. Nothing is skyrocketing anymore. But we also not only look at actual usage, which we're thrilled with, because this is consistently our highest usage database. I think we're over 2 million at this point, 2.2. My team's also really interested in cost per use because we review every year. What do we subscribe to? Does it still make sense? This obviously is a long-term purchase, but we want to be sure that we're promoting it in the right ways and getting the usage we want. And so we started at around $5.89 a use in that first year. It's consistently dropped since then. We're currently at 42 cents every time we access it, and every time we use it, that cost drops. And with the kind of usage, 300,000 plus visits a year, that is continuing to drop. So I feel over time, this will be the cheapest resource we ever bought. It started as the most expensive. So we've been really, really pleased with the usage that we've seen. Angela and her team drive that. I think that's so important. If you're making an investment like that, it has to be front and center. It has to be something that your teams are talking about, that your teams are promoting. We all know that getting customers to use digital resources can be challenging. They don't always understand them. So your team really promoting this is what this can do for you makes all the difference.
Thank you all for coming today. Thank you one more time to NewsBank for hosting us. We couldn't have done this without you. So thanks, everyone.